He's highly sought after speakers and consultants and so forth, so it's really hard to get it on his calendar. But in seriousness, I just want to spend a couple moments to properly introduce our guest speaker this morning. He was a man that wears many, many hats. He's a husband, a father of 3, a grandfather of 7, and currently
and an all-around great guy.
A heck of a rep.
There he is.
Didn't know how to dress though.
A soccer. He referees soccer along with our friend Joe Ganello. In fact, Joe's going to head out here shortly to run out to some soccer game. Hopefully, he hasn't had too much pie, Joe. You're good. Okay. Pastor Scott, our guest speaker this morning is involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. He is the board chairman of a regional college, accredited college, and also has national accredited programs, Nyack College and Alliance Theological Seminary. And he was recently recognized with an honorary doctorate degree at that institution. Now, our dean of students, our dean of the seminary, said it best, which was that it really wasn't an honorary degree; it was very much earned, and I would have to second that without question. I'll say that he has led this institution through some of the most challenging times in its 139-year history, and those challenges are ongoing. And most recently, the consolidation of the campus to our Lower Manhattan facility, and then the installation of a new president. So he also serves on the National Board of Trustees for our denomination, the Christian Missionary Alliance. And not only that, but on the executive committee. So he represents you and me and our church, and he has the ears of the leaders of our movement. He is a friend, a pastor, a mentor. I remember when I first moved into my neighborhood, the neighbor across the street, when he heard I went to Essex, said that he had received counseling from today's guest speaker. When he first came to Essex, and just the words resonate with me, said, he was wise beyond his years. And some of you have been the recipients of that wisdom and that mentoring. And so it is with great joy and great pleasure and great honor to have with us this morning our pastor, our leader, Pastor Scott Slocum. Would you please
Why is the end of the year?
Pretty good.
Thanks, buddy. Man, I could have listened to that forever. When someone tells you you're wise beyond your years when you're 27, it means a lot more than when you're 63. So you kind of lose that. So some people comment about my shirt already. It's interesting with the Yankees and Red Sox. There's never neutral. You've either spit on me this morning and cursed me or welcomed me. But it didn't take me long to pick out this shirt. The only thing I struggle with, I laughed. You can appreciate this, most others wouldn't. I found a shirt in Israel. I was in a T-shirt shop in Israel. You can buy them for $3. And this is not a shirt I would buy. It's not a shirt I would wear anywhere. But I got to tell you right front, so it has a not nice word in it. But I just laughed. It says, when I look at you, I think to myself, damn, my wife is lucky. So I'm with a bunch of church people, and I go, what do you do? I'm buying a T-shirt. What shirt are you buying? Love Israel. So I buy this T-shirt because I'm thinking, my wife's got to see this. My kids have to see this. So I bring it up and I show them, and they laugh and whatever. You gonna wear that? I go, yeah, right. That's one, I wouldn't anyway. Number two, that's just not who I am. My wife has to go to the grocery store. She goes, hey, come with me real quick. And I was working in the yard, it's dirty, so I throw off my shirt and grab what I thought was just a white T-shirt. I don't look at it, I don't think about it. She doesn't look at it, she doesn't think about it. We're in the grocery store in Hannaford's. We're in one of the aisles, and here's a woman who left the church probably 20 years ago, unhappy. But, they kind of left right. They kind of talked about it. So, and here's my rule of thumb. I always say, people who leave the church wrong, and people, you can move from a church to a church. Just like a pastor can go church to church, people can be called to places. I have no issue with that. But leave right. Because what I've learned through the years, if you leave right, when I see you in the grocery store, in the aisle, you keep your heads up, you go out, you say, hey, how you doing? When you leave wrong, I know that too, because I can see them, and they put their head down and they get out of the aisle. They don't want to talk to you. So this woman sees it, hey, so we're sitting there chatting and talking, and she keeps looking at me. I can't think why. It's just, it's kind of like, I don't get it. And all of a sudden, she gets this really pained look on her face, and she goes, oh, and says, well, that's good. And she leaves. She just like abruptly, and we're walking away, and I'm thinking, man, Diane, that was odd, right? And she goes, yeah. Well, then we see another church woman, and we begin chatting and talking, and now I recognize she keeps looking at my shirt, and so now it dawns on me, and I kind of laughed, and I go, what is she looking at? What is she looking at? What? And she goes, you idiot. hey, And later, she was just forgetting about the shirt. She says, so the first one, you think they'll ever come back to the church? No. Nope, don't think so at all. Hey, so my message, it's got to be, I'm not preaching, I'm talking here. My talk this morning is called 222. That's the title, if you will, 222, which happens to be, happens to be my weight, 222 pounds. I'm proud of that because I just had my physical. I have one every year, every 6 months, but I have my big one every year, and I just had it this past week. And I'm 222 pounds. I've lost 20 pounds. Every one of my, oh, stop, you don't mean it. Every one of my numbers are good. My blood pressure's down, my cholesterol's down, everything good. Except my bad cholesterol is also down. I laughed a little bit because she says, so your bad cholesterol is actually low. We got to bring that back up. I go, sure, what do I got to do? She goes, you got to eat avocados, vegetables, almonds. And I kind of laugh. I go, okay, what else? What else do I have to do? So I said, that's not working. She said, would you like fish? I go, absolutely. So since since Wednesday, I've had 4 fried fish dinners. Love fried anything. But all my numbers are good, so I go home. My family, I said, look at me. I walk out, you look at me. I go, I'm an Adonis. I mean, really, I'm incredible. 222. So I'm pretty proud of that. A quick question for you. How many of you would say that, you know what, I would love to have my walk with God just explode into something great? I mean, it's already good. I like my walk with God, but I would just like to have walk with God. It's just out of this world incredible. Just raise your hand. See, I love church groups because you have to raise your hand. Pastors feel so good about themselves when they say that because I can walk out and say, I was at a men's breakfast. Every one of those men made a commitment in their walk with God. But let's be honest, it's not fair because I could also say this. Hey, how many of you, I know the great questions to ask or not ask, how many of you really could care less about your walk with God and hope the thing just tanks completely? Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't mean a whole lot that you raise your hand. I just needed you to do that to bait you a little bit to get you started. But I want to talk about that. I want to talk about walk with God. But you're going to have to walk with me a little bit because really what I want to do is tell you my story. I want you to know me a little bit and some of my experiences a little bit. And I'll get to the walk with God piece, but it really won't be to the end. So you have to kind of walk along with me for a moment. Let me have a prayer. Father, I thank you for these guys. Look around the room, different ages, different backgrounds, and yet enjoying each other, talking, enjoying pie, and just enjoying the opportunity together. So I thank you for every one of them. Thank you for their commitment to be here, for the time that they've put in and have given, for those that have worked and served in all of those pieces. I thank you for each one of them. And I pray in these moments that you'll take down any barriers, allow us to hear from you, and as we hear from you, might we respond to you. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So Joe, Joe's a soccer referee, which I just want to say he had his license removed for refereeing because he was so horrible, but he just got it back. So so if you have to leave early, I will not. You want to leave now? No, he may have to leave. Just be aware. Hey, Tony Evans had this great quote. He said this: "A kingdom man is the kind of man that when his feet hit the ground every morning, the devil says, 'Oh crap, he's up.'" Man, I just love that. That a kingdom guy, a guy who loves God, is the kind of guy you wake up in the morning and Satan goes, no, I got my hands full today. Let's hope that's true of us. Let me give you some background, some history. I came to Jesus when I was 6 years old. So my walk with God started early. My mom and dad, some of you have heard this on Sunday mornings, my mom and dad did not grow up in church. My grandparents on my mom's side were believers, but other than that, that was it. My mom and dad were not believers, didn't come to Christ until some years later. They've been married. World War II's over. My dad bagged groceries in a little town called Factoryville, Pennsylvania. Needed to get a job better than that. And there was this new company that wasn't new, but I mean, it was really exploding, called IBM. Factoryville, Pennsylvania is in northern part of the eastern side of Pennsylvania. And Endicott, New York is just 45 minutes away. And Endicott, New York used to be the home of the largest IBM complex in the world, meaning spanned city block after city block. My dad went up, interviewed, got a job, and moved his family up there, had an apartment. They had a little girl. She's now 5 or 6 years old, and the people lived next door to them in the apartments took my sister at that point to vacation Bible school at their church. My parents went to the closing, not ceremony, but closing program. People befriended them, started going to church, came to Christ. My sister's 10 years older, so I didn't come along till some time later. And my parents, when they came to Christ, they were brought to Christ by a couple of people who mentored them, and the church we grew up in could not have been more legalistic. I mean, everything was wrong. And my parents had come from a background where they did go to church, but what they saw the people in the church doing kind of didn't resonate much as far as walk with God. These people would be in the basement of the church on Saturday night, drinking, dancing, smoking, all sorts of just horrible behaviors taking place. And then they, clean up the basement of the church and go to church the next day. And so when they came to Christ, what their picture was, there's all these people who go to church, but it doesn't mean anything. So when they came to Jesus Christ and the people began talking to them saying, hey, if you're going to walk with God, you got to make a change. I mean, they made wholesale change. And so in that context, you can be real open to just about anything, and they were. And the church we happened to be in was incredibly, legalistic, meaning secular radio, could not listen to secular radio, couldn't dance, didn't watch TV on Sundays other than sports. That was acceptable, sports on TV Sunday afternoons. On Sundays, you couldn't do anything, meaning we did nothing. As a kid, I could play in the backyard by myself. But if all the kids were playing baseball game, I couldn't do that because no organized sports on a Sunday. It was the Lord's Day. Those kind of things where I was the setting. But you know what? They love Jesus. And unfortunately, most of the kids that grew up in that church with me, most of them have completely walked away from God. Because they grew up in a setting where the walk with God thing was all about what you do and what you don't do and what you don't participate in. And it wasn't about heart. And so I loved Jesus. I knew they loved me. I felt a calling in my life that God was His hand was on me. But I often look back and I just think, I think by God's grace that I didn't end up like a lot of my friends who literally just walked away from it all because they had, it was a lifestyle that was so rigid that it was like, who wants to be a part of that? So I'm growing up and I don't know what I want to be in my life, but I had three things. I either wanted to be a cop, I wanted to be a fireman, mortician, or a pastor. Those four things. And I'm serious, those are my four deals. I really looked at going down the police realm. I didn't do that, but I have been a unofficial police chaplain. Started in Detroit with a group of U.S. Marshals, and have always had a warm spot in my heart for police departments and policemen. To this day, I will seek out policemen to befriend them because they live in a different world, and I love to be able to minister to them. Firemen, I did a volunteer fireman thing all the way through college. EMT, worked at an ambulance. One of my great moments, I say this because I'm such a lean man, but just before we came here, in 1987, just before God had released us from Detroit where we were pastoring, I kind of had this hankering again to do something. So I went and took the full exam to be a Detroit City fireman. Took the whole deal, passed it, highest score, and I'm saying about the physical piece, lugging a body through a building and whatever. Got offered a full-time job with the Detroit Fire Department about a month or two before we said yes to come to Essex, and God had closed that door. But I like that. I like the adrenaline stuff. good under pressure. I kind of like all those things. The mortician piece might seem odd. And the pastor piece could seem odd, but I will say this to you, and this is so many of us, our kids are grown, but for those with kids who are still young, I wanted to be a mortician and or a pastor because two of the sharpest people I'd ever met, one was a funeral home director and one was the pastor. Modeling is everything. Role model is huge. And one of the reasons why I went down the pastoral road is because the pastor of my church was this guy that was sharp, classy, carried himself well. I mean, represented God incredibly well, spoke into people's lives. And as I watched him as a kid, you just kind of said, I'd like to be like that. Here's a little side note, free benefit for you. Carry out your life in such a way that whether it's one of your kids or whether it's a grandkid or whether it's somebody else's kid, that when they see you talk and interact with the world, they would say to themselves, yeah, I wouldn't mind being like that. Because that really started that process for me. I was in middle school and I had this sense I was supposed to be in pastoral ministry, so off I went. I went to a Christian college, small Christian college in Minnesota, now called Crown College. Met my wife there. I'll tell you the side story to the men's group. It's hard to say it's in public to the whole group. The way I met my wife, I played soccer. We were always there early. Of course, soccer in college starts early. We're there weeks before anyone else gets there. So we're always there when the incoming freshmen would come in. And they had a specific period of time they had to work and had to move in. So we delivered a soccer team. We deliberately would do our practices early that day so we could be in the lobby at 9 o'clock in the morning when the freshmen were registering. And we literally sat on the wall. They always see people helping with their bags and stuff, so we'd be there ready. But we were very selective as to who we helped. Some young guys coming in with 10,000 pounds worth of stuff. It's like, yeah, get out of the way, wait for the girl right behind you. And we had this little rule, and we weren't just there to help. The rule was to see who the girls were coming in. And the written rule was, as we sat there, if you saw a girl you were interested in, you had to claim her quickly. And so that meant that when you saw someone, you said, she's mine. And once the rule was, once you claimed her, you had 24 hours in which to ask the girl out. If you didn't ask her in 24 hours, she's free game. That sounds horrible. So why I don't tell the story often. So my wife, Diane, walks through. I go, she's mine. And everybody goes, grab. And you know what? She was out of my class. I mean, she's out of my league. And I had 24 hours, and I was so scared to death, I couldn't even talk to her. Her brother, I didn't know this later, they hear me claim her, and her brother goes, who? I go, that girl right there. That's my sister. And I go, I'll pay you $20. You got to ask her out for me. So he did. Would you go out with that guy? It was actually $5, but he says 20. And so that's how we started dating and got to know her. I went to school studying to be a pastor. And so going down that road. I was a sophomore in my freshman year as I was leaving. One of the things I would say to you that as I was a kid growing up, and now getting ready to go to college, there's a guy in my church who, if I was 16 when he started this relationship, he was probably 30. And we played softball together, and we kind of connected, but he's still 30. But one day he says, hey, I'm going hunting. You want to go hunting? And I was like, yeah. And so we went rabbit hunting, and pretty soon he'd say, I'm going to go snowplow. You want to snowplow? So we do that. And so I had this 30-year-old guy that I just hung out with, married guy with kids, but he'd ask me, hey, how's your walk with God? And we do this while we were snowplowing. We do this while we were hunting. And he'd call me. He'd call me if I wasn't around once a week just to talk and check in. It wasn't odd. It was just like, I like the guy. We did stuff together. And that kind of helped me with that walk with God thing towards, of course, ministry and stuff, just because I had someone else that could relate to. And I wasn't relating well to my other friends. I mean, most high school students don't sit down and talk about their walk with God. It's just he was speaking in my life. I got to college. I'm there my sophomore year, studying to be a pastor. And one of my professors' name was George. And during lunchtime, we'd play basketball. You kind of pick up basketball games at school. And so we'd play, and the faculty also had a game. They'd play at one end, we'd play at the other. And it was always fun watching them because this is where you saw the real faculty come out. The ones that stood in the front of the room were different than the ones that were elbowing each other in the basketball court, and pushing each other around. And one particular day, they were short a couple guys, and I was there, and another guy. They said, play with us, so we started playing basketball with the faculty. One of the guys we played with was George. George Thompson was his name. Probably this high, probably he looked like he was in his 80s then, but probably not. Just that's your framework when you're young. White hair and stocky, and he was horrible. I mean, he was a horrible basketball player, but he loved to play, and we started playing quite frequently. And his only defensive move he had is when you got the ball. He did this to me early on. I got the ball, I'm getting ready to shoot. He reached and pulled my shorts down. And I got to tell you, if you stink at basketball, you do that early, and it's effective. Because every time I had the basketball, all I could do was go. And we were in the locker room one day, and George says to me, hey, and I had him as a speech professor now. And so we were early on, how to do speeches and talk, whatever. He ended up being my homiletics professor. Homiletics means the art of preaching. So he's the guy who would be my guy teaching me how to preach. But we weren't there yet. I'm a sophomore, and we're sitting in the locker room. He just showered, and we're sitting there, and he goes, hey, I got a question for you. Hey, I've been thinking about this. He said, you ever wonder if you believe what you believe because you really believe it? Or because it's just what you've been told all along. And I got to tell you, he said it very sincerely. If he wasn't sincere, he sure faked it. But he asked that question, and I have to be honest, when I think about him asking that, I really believe he was asking. I really believe, even though this guy was a pastor, an ordained minister, and his doctorate in communications, but I believe that while we're sitting there just talking, this was not a baited question for me. I really believe to this day that when he was asking it, he finds himself at times saying, do I really believe what I believe? And so it was so natural when he said, do you ever do that? I mean, do you really believe? And so how do I answer that? No. I'm not smart enough to think about what I really believe. I just do what I'm told. But he started me thinking. And so we started this conversation. And one day he goes, hey, let's go have coffee. So we have coffee at the coffee shop. And he goes, I've been thinking about that question for me, but also for you. Have you ever figured out, do you really believe it all because you really, really believe it? And I said, yeah, I think I really do believe it. And then his question was, well, how do you know that what you believe is right? Now, here, he may have been working more towards the mentoring piece, but I have to also say his questions seem to have some legitimacy. So we had this dialogue. He goes, I got an idea for you. He goes, I got a challenge for you. Because he now knew my story. Grew up in the church, same church, blah, 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 the whole 9 yards. My background. He goes, I'll tell you what. I'll give you a challenge. Would you be willing, this is like in the spring of sophomore year, would you be willing for the rest of this year and into next year, would you be willing, when you come back to school, because I'm gone for the summer, to not go to the church you go to every Sunday? Because even in school, they wanted us to go to a local church. I chose one, liked the pastor. Would you be willing not to do that and instead go to all kinds of places that are outside of your faith tradition? Go to the groups that aren't like what you, and even non-Christian things. Would you be willing to do that? So I thought, well, sure, why not? And he said he'll give me a waiver because, in a Christian school, a ministry major, you got to go, to a church, you have to be a part of it and all those things. I'll get you a waiver that you're going to do this. So I said yes. So for the rest of that semester, then I went home for the summer in my home church, came back that fall, and that for the next weeks, I went everywhere. I mean, I went to the Catholic church for a couple of Sundays. I went to the Jewish synagogue on Friday nights. I went to a Mormon church. I went to Jehovah's Witness. I went to a Buddhist group. I mean, I went just about everywhere and got the things that I could read. And then what happened is he'd say, tell me what you see, what you experience. And we'd sit down, have coffee, and talk about that. Now, I'll spin ahead real quick. I love talking to people about Jesus Christ. And I could not possibly have known when he had me do this that some numbers of years later, I mean, I'm not sure how many now, I graduated in 1980, so a long time ago. I couldn't have imagined that when I sit down and talk to someone about believing in Jesus Christ, that I could actually look at someone and say, because of my background being brought up in the church, that I could look at somebody and say, on my shelf right there, I've got the teachings of Buddha, I've got the teachings of Confucius, I've got the Quran, I got them all right there. And you know what? I've actually read them, and I've actually gone to all these different experiences. And I'll tell you why I'm a follower of Jesus Christ is because when I take the Bible and I put it against everything else, it's the only one that makes absolute sense. answers all the key questions, why we're here, where we're going, what's our purpose. Never to be found. Think about this, thousands and thousands of years, no flaws. No one where someone say, hey, this is wrong. It's accurate. And on top of that, when I put everything in place, I walk away and I go, it makes sense. Yeah. And so I can say that because I went down that road. I wouldn't have ever thought that. And so he and I would sit there and talk and chat, and have this dialogue till I graduated. But even then, he became a good friend. Some of you might recall, years ago, we were at the fairgrounds. I actually flew him in to our Easter service at the fairgrounds and gave him an award and an appreciation for all the lives that he had impacted through students like me that were out preaching in churches, big and small, because of his influence. So I left that church, I left school, going to my first church. I went to my first church. I was an associate pastor there. I knew I was going to be a senior pastor, but went to them and said, listen, I'm going to be here for 3 years. Teach me all you got. I mean, I'll do anything in the church. So I did children's ministries. I did discipleship. I did small groups. I did college and career. I mean, I was loaded with everything that I could possibly do and did it deliberately because I didn't want to be someday a senior pastor and sit down with the children's ministry people and say, I got to speak into this. And they can't look at me and say, well, you know what you're talking about because I have done it. I have done student ministries. So I had that kind of experience. Again, at this point, I'm married. I'm not looking nearly as good as I do now. And I got to do something for exercise. So I start playing basketball again at the YMCA in Lima, Ohio. Lunchtime basketball, grab my stuff, go down there. And I got to tell you, brutal. I mean, this is like just brutal city basketball. I played in college, and there's those things that, they push and shove, but all, hey, in the name of Jesus, poof, what I mean? In YMCA basketball, they do use Jesus' name differently, and it's, just brutal. And, but you kind of like it. I got to know one of the guys there, older guy, could have been my father probably, big name insurance guy, everyone knew his name in town, insurance company, and we kind of hit it off. I'm not real outgoing. In a group like this, I just assume be with a person or, and some of you guys bounce around social. That's not me. Basketball, go in, do my job, get out. And so some passing conversations. So again, this guy begins to have some passing conversation, and we kind of hit it off. He's asked me to, hey, why don't you go get coffee or whatever. I think I did once, but, kind of stood off a little bit. I refereed soccer. It's when I started refereeing soccer back then. I was in Lima, Ohio. I actually started the soccer association, and I went and got certified. 2 guys wanted to get certified with me. These were all older guys. We drove 4 hours to get certified together and all these trainings, so I got to know them. We had this kind of this closeness, but I had a job, church was busy, never got really, really close, until I accepted a new church in Detroit, moving from there just as we're getting ready to leave. I pick up the newspaper, big headlines, Lima businessman takes own life. I read the article, and here's a picture of this guy that I play basketball with every 3 times a week, every 3 times a week. Parked his car at a reservoir, left a note, left his wallet, left his keys, but left a note, literally in a suit and a dress coat in February, went to the reservoir and just walked in the reservoir. Someone saw him. Couldn't figure out what they were doing, but he just walked in the reservoir. And I have to believe that because the witnesses said he just went in and, didn't flail, didn't anything, just kept walking, disappeared. Which means that to do that, you'd have to walk in and literally underwater go and take a big gulp and breath deliberately. If not, anyone who knows, people float. Even till they drown, they float. And so it means he had to deliberately do that. So, man, I was just devastated. I was devastated. I never talked to this guy about God. I never had a conversation about God. I never had a conversation about spiritual things. I spent hours and hours with these 2 guys, referee guys. We'd drive back and forth together. And we'd stop and eat together and do things. But, I never brought up spiritual stuff. Because I got to tell you, it was odd. It felt really awkward. And I would say, but they could ask me anything because I know a minister and I was a good friend. Yeah, but I didn't bring up anything and didn't ask him a question. conversations could have been had a dozen different directions. I never had them. But, guilt like that doesn't usually last long because we're usually off something else. Well, I have a whole new church to go to. So I go to that church. Now I'm in Detroit, Michigan. We the church before I got there bought an abandoned school building, elementary school, changing area, bought an abandoned school building. And it was huge. We couldn't even use all of it, of course. And I had my office there. And on top of that, we had office space that we didn't need. And so we gave space to a local guy. He was in our church, but he was the director of Youth for Christ. Some of you might know the name Youth for Christ. Big organization that works with high school students. But they don't work with high school students in a church. They work with high school students in local schools. So they're not connected to a church. Now, this is kind of key because if you're going to do a ministry that seeks to bring people to Jesus and you're not connected to a local church, if you don't do your job, what do you got? You've got no job. I mean, it's real simple. See, in the church, you can say, hey, I do student ministries, but the truth of it is you don't have to really go out and win new students because as long as people come, they bring their students, and we feel good about having done our jobs. I do children's ministries, but I don't have to go out and get new children because as long as people come to the church with children, but not when you're working at a high school and you're going to go work with kids. Unless you do it right, there are no kids. So you don't. So that's how it goes. So he shared an office space in our building. My office was here. His was there. His name was Jerry. Big guy. I mean, just huge guy. Deep laugh voice. So I could always hear he was there. And I had been pastoring out at the church. Now, don't forget, I grew up in the church. I went to a Christian college. I've been trained how to be a pastor. I had some good skills. And I really love Jesus. Okay, I qualify to do the job. And I did it relatively well. I mean, a good communicator and, so growth and whatever. But in about 6 to 8 months, less than a year, Jerry knocks on my office door. And again, I laugh a little bit because it's a school. So, the door was, have you ever seen the faculty lounge doors, wooden door that swings open type thing with the air? So he knocks on the door, he walks in, it's just a school. And he sits down across my desk and he says this. We're doing some small chat stuff. And he goes, here's the deal. I've been watching you for the past 6, 9, 8 months, whatever, as a pastor. And again, he attended the church as well. And he goes, I've been sitting watching you for the past 6 to 8 months. I'm willing to disciple you. Oh, thank you. So I was hoping that you'd ask me. So we talked for a little bit. Oh, yeah, tell me what it means and whatever. I go, okay, great. Hey, listen, let me think about it. Let me think it through. Let me pray about it, because that's what we say. Let me pray about it. Let me think about it, and I'll let you know. And I got to tell you, in my head, I'm going, there's no way in the world. There's no way in the world. Because part of the reason is there's pride. Pride's an issue. I'm the pastor of the church. I'm the senior pastor of the church. Now, side note, I'm the only pastor of the church, but I'm the senior. I'm the senior pastor in the church. There's no one else above me. I'm it. And to have a guy in my church who's roughly my age, maybe a year or two older than I am, who says he'll disciple me is offensive. I got to be honest. Now, if one of my elders had said something who are 60, and I'm looking at a long walk with God, and then I might go, maybe. But the truth is, my pride still wouldn't let me, because I'm the pastor. I'm not going to be mentored by one of the guys. So I never got back to him. It's just one of those things. You know this because you do this all the time. Hey, honey, your wife asks, yeah, let me think about it. You never answer her. Hey, I want to do this major renovation project. Yeah, let me think about it. Yeah. So this is what we do, right? This is what we do. What we do is we listen attentively. Oh, yeah. Well, let me process that. And then we file that away, and we never act on it. It's our mechanism is we just don't say anything because we all know if we don't act, it will just go away. I don't do a thing. Months later, I should say, so during these months later, school building, my office is here, the elementary school playground is right outside my windows. No air conditioning, windows are open. Jerry, who has this ministry, has about a dozen staff, all volunteer staff, that work with him with high school students. And at least once a week, they have a staff meeting at the office. In the summertime, they'd go out there and sit in the playground, and they would talk. And I listen. I'm listening to him. I'm listening to them. I'm listening to the dialogue. I'm watching him. I went to a couple of events that they did. I felt like I had to go because he's in my church. About 6 to 7 months later, I walk into his office and knock on the door. And by the way, my office was the biggest one they had. It was the teacher's lounge. It was the biggest one they had. His office was probably one of the smallest ones. You get a little hole in the wall. I knock on his door because it's free anyway. Don't forget, we'll give it to him for free. And I knock on his door and I walk in and I sit down and now I think about it. I'm thinking this little hole in the wall. I got the big office. I'm sitting across from him and I say to him, I've been watching you for the past 6 or 9 months. I want you to disciple me. And he goes, no. I go, what do you mean, no? He goes, no. Just like that, no. And actually he's like, no. And I go, what do you mean? And he starts laughing. Because I came and offered this to you, and you blew me off. I think you said this. Yeah, let me think about it. Let me process it. Let me pray about it, and I'll get back to you. He goes, not only do I not think you didn't process it, not only do I not think that you didn't pray about it, I know you didn't get back to me. Because for months, we walked by each other every Sunday, every day of the week, in the church building, in the office, and you don't even acknowledge that we had the conversation. Why would I want to disciple that? I got to tell you, it's a fair question. And I said, because I need it. And because for the past 6 or 9 months, I have watched and listened to you. And you do something I don't do. I don't know what it is. You carry yourself in a way that I don't carry myself. Noah just walked in, just if you want to know. And I sit there and I'm thinking, because the bottom line is, there's something missing here, and I don't know what it is. So you go, okay, but it's going to be in my terms. Now, I got to tell you a side note, where I'm preaching tomorrow, and I'm going to preach tomorrow about coming to God on His terms. Because the truth of it is, we go to God in His terms. We don't go to Him ours, which we think we go on ours. We really don't. But He said to me, hey, Noah, walk back out there, just because, what's his face? Dwight. Yeah, Dwight's looking for you. Listen, you can call someone. Don't tell your wife. What's her face? Don't do that. But and so I need you to speak into this. I need you to do something. So he goes, my terms. My terms are, number one, that we won't meet weekly, but at least twice a month. I'll set the time, the date, sometimes weekly. And you know, he gave me the things I agreed to do. But please know, it wasn't like a, you're working for me thing. But it's just, he knows me, and I think he knows men. Because unless you lock in, we're going to be doing this and this and this and this. Again, you know us. So that's what he laid out. So we did that. And change took place. Because one of the things I realized is that he was actually reaching people for Jesus, where most church people just pretend to reach people for Jesus. He actually did it. He actually took somebody who cared nothing about spiritual things, a high school teenager, start at zero and get to a place where they would come to Christ and then disciple them. And let me say, disciple them in a balanced way. In a way where you kind of look at that and you go, yeah, right. So he's working me. And he's working with me in so many ways. I left Detroit to come here. In fact, back to George Thompson, my professor in college, when I was coming here, I called him on the phone. And I said, I got to make a decision where to go. I don't know where to go. And I have 3 choices. We were asked to go 3 different places, all within 24 hours. We were asked to candidate. One in California, one in Connecticut, and here. And George gave me incredible counsel as to how to go about that. We came here, we got called all 3 places, but accepted this call. I'm not exaggerating. 24 hours after we said yes to here, I get a phone call from Hawaii, and the guy who's the head of the district there says, listen, I got a large church in Oahu. It's our largest Alliance church in the country, in the state. And I've known him. I work with him for years. He goes, they need a pastor. I gave him your resume, gave him all your stuff. They called up and said, we'll take him. Don't even have to interview him. He said, all you got to do is say yes, and it's yours, 3-year commitment. We make 3 years because a lot of people, what happens, they want to go to Hawaii, then they get there and they realize that they've got island phobia, where you can't get off of it. And he said, so I guess say yes, and there you. And I'm looking at my wife, and she's going, what? I just going, I can't tell you. And I look and I said, he just offered us a job in Oahu. For 3 years, guarantee. They move us the whole 9 yards. And, we both looked at each other and have to be honest, looking, going, why not 24 hours earlier? Because you know what? 24 hours earlier, I would have said, absolutely. Why? Because I'm that shallow. Let's be honest, most of us are. At that point in time, someone says, pastor a large church in Oahu, pay all your expenses, all you got to do is commit to 3 years. Just about every one of us would go, what's to lose with that? Wouldn't have given much thought, but I have a lot of thought to hear, so we said yes. I came here, and when I got here, my life was radically different. My ministry, radically different. How I walk with God, radically different. Now, I have to tell you, when I came here, I misread the culture. So if anyone else is feeling guilty with sin in their life, you can leave now as well. I warned him I was going to do that. So here's the deal, and here's where we get to the ending, which is actually application and the explanation of the title and all of that. I came here and things were different. Now the culture was different. I came thinking we're going to do church a certain way, and it just wasn't working. After about a year, I sat down with our elders back then, and I said this. I said, I just want you to know I'm going to stop doing everything we're doing. We're just going to just do church as normal because I've completely misread the culture. And I got to take time to read the culture. So we went into a mode of me trying to figure out the culture. But when I got here, ministry-wise, something was totally, totally different. Because in the years leading up, and now I can affirm that, I have figured out that a man's walk with God is not complete without two key elements. Now, I mean, I like to laugh and joke, but I'm dead serious with you. If you want to have a vibrant walk with God, there are two key elements that have to be present in your life, or you are kidding yourself about your walk with God. And you cannot have these two elements and be faithful in attendance, read your Bible, love to worship, all of those pieces. But it's not a holistic, fulfilled picture of a walk with God. So what are they? You need the Bible and prayer. Nope. Sorry. Nope. Nope. I'll come back to that. Problem is, I'll pick on this. The problem is, that's where we run. Yep, that's what you got to have. I can show you people full of Bible and prayer, not balanced in their walk with God. In fact, I can show you churches filled with people who can quote Scripture and pray like nobody's business. And I would challenge you that I can show you that their walk with God is not complete. So it's not that. It's not any of the things that we put on our list, though, to your statement, they have to be present. You're not going to have a walk with God if you don't have the Bible involved in your life. If you're not in God's Word. If you're not having a communication with God, not going to be, I got all that. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that there are some basic stuff that, of course, you have to have. But I want to talk about two things that no one typically really thinks about. When I say them, you'll think about them. But that have to be present. Two things. In fact, there are two relationships. There are two relationships that if you do not have these in your walk with God, in your life, I guarantee you, you are not walking in the fullness of what He wants for you. First one, a relationship with another Christian guy that will challenge you, talk to you, hold you accountable, and help you grow together. If you don't have that, you don't have it. Now, immediately, a statement like this, in a group like this, don't raise your hands, I'm not talking about anyone I know specifically. I just know men. Many of us are going, oh, I got that because, look, I'm here right now. See, the equation of, well, no, I go to the men's breakfast. I got men in my life. And church, I say hi to the guys. Nah, not the same. Not the same. It is not the same as having someone in your life, another Christian guy, someone to grow with, talk to, someone to lean in with, someone to figure out God with, someone that when, you basically can sit down, talk to them about anything, have them talk to you about anything, but there's something about the relationship that is more than just a passing conversation. A one-to-one with someone. And I have to tell you, when I met and I began hanging out with that older Christian guy when I was 16 and he was 30, I have to tell you, though I grew up in the church and knew Jesus, when he and I began to hang out and do things, my walk with God soared. And he was not some great spiritual leader. He didn't preach. I don't know if he could quote scripture, because he didn't. All he did is hunt with me and walk with me. And I was with someone who was talking about things in a spiritual realm, not just the world realm. I guarantee some of you will talk about politics, Biden or Trump, or vaccines or no vaccines, far more than you even think about talking about God with some other guy. And my life, my spiritual walk with God soared. And then I walked away, went to college, and I was in Christian college, flat. And then George said, hey, do you ever wonder about if you really believe what you believe because you believe it or because someone told about you? And then we started having coffee and talking. Soared. And then I left college. And then I went to my first church. And I got to tell you, kind of flat. And then Jerry said, hey, I want to disciple you. Soared. And I began to put together, you know what? This idea that I can have a vibrant walk with God all by myself is one of the greatest lies men specifically believe. It does not happen. You can go to church, you can be active, you can cook breakfast. By the way, my eggs were a little dry. But I'm sure you love Jesus, and that's more important. But it doesn't matter your involvement. One guy, at least one, maybe a group, but at least one, where regularly there's dialogue in life about spiritual things. Now, side note real quickly, it's about this point too, where most guys go, oh, that's really hard. That's really awkward. That's really odd. Do you realize that every one of the conversations I told you about, hunting, running errands, fishing, playing basketball, refereeing soccer, did you happen to catch that every one of those relationships I had was not a guy who sat down and said, hey, let's get together today and study the Bible. It was about, you want to go fishing? You fish? Oh, hey, we should hook up sometime. We should have coffee sometime. And then the friendship began, and it went from there. If you don't have it, please know that don't kid yourself. You are not thriving in your walk with God. Second, that's got to be present. Every person's life I've ever seen with a vibrant walk with God is a relationship with someone who doesn't know Jesus. A deliberate relationship with men that don't know Jesus. The best times in my walk with God is when I've been sitting with someone who has no clue about God and begins to ask a question that says, yeah, I'm just wondering. And you begin to have that conversation. Now, I'll tell you, one of the problems for many, many men in church settings is that many of you will go, yeah, I'm going to get the guy in my life. And so you'll do a men's Bible study, you'll do a men's group, you'll do whatever. But for most guys, and don't raise your hands now, if I were honest to say and look at your life right now and say, who are the non-church, non-believer people that you have deliberately built a relationship with a mindset that maybe we can have a conversation about God. Maybe you'd meet Jesus. Most guys, if they're honest, would go, I don't. It's hard, it's awkward, it's all of those things. I sat in the car for 4 hours, like a dozen times, to get certified for soccer with two guys that were captive audiences. I could have told them anything, I could have said anything, and they would have listened. And because I was a good referee, they would have listened because I'd earned their respect, even as a kid. And again, I would say to you, you can pick the ways to go about this. One of my churches, a group of guys that on once a month, is either Thursday night or Friday night, depends, they off and on, but they'd go to dinner together. I mean, just a group of guys, and they literally get together and they said, hey, where should we go to dinner? It was only a group of 6 guys, and because you can't do more than that anyway, realistically, and when more came, they split up, and it was just dinner out. And they pick a place, and they'd go out and have dinner, and just do that. But he was doing it with non-Christian guys. The guy who started it was like his neighbor. Hey, we should go to some. I shared this story one Sunday morning. One of my good friends in the summers, this is in Connecticut, and in the summers on Friday nights, he has at his house called Holy Smokes. And he's invited all of his neighbor guys that are around to come over to his house, and in his backyard, they smoke cigars, and they sip brandy or whiskey, and they talk about God. Now, they didn't start talking about God, Because I got news for you, for some Christian guys who go, hey, you want to come to my house and smoke a cigar, have whiskey, I'll tell you all about God? I got to tell you, that really doesn't resonate. So the problem with that statement, not only does it not resonate to non-church people, the church people can't figure it out either, because you can't do those things. But he had to get past the moment that he sits there and says, it's not a drunk fest. He says, we sit there, we smoke cigars, we talk about the Yankees, we talk about the Mets, we talk about football. And then somewhere along the way, he goes, I have a question every week I put out there. And then we debate the question. Pick your thing. Pick your thing. Start your relationship. I'll close up and I'll give you the final challenge. I referee soccer. Now, I love soccer. But I referee soccer for one key reason. Every fall, 5 days a week, I am right next to someone who doesn't know Jesus that I get the chance to build relationships with. Because none of my soccer friends are here, I'll say this, I can't even begin to tell you, almost without tears, the number of times that my soccer people have showed up in church simply because I'm a good official. And simply because while we're riding, we'll talk about stuff. And all of a sudden, I get one ride I had. This guy, we'd never talked about anything spiritual. And we're riding in the car. We got to go to Middlebury. And he just goes, my life's a wreck. I think my wife's walking out on me. What do we do? And I'm thinking, I don't believe he's asking every other official he rides with. But I think there's a reason why he's asking me this question. There's a fellow, hasn't been in church yet, but one of my soccer referees, before the first election with Trump, I was refereeing a game, and I'd done this thing about the elections, and he surprised me, because this guy does not love Jesus. He knows the name Jesus Christ, but he doesn't worship the name Jesus. And before the game, he goes, I've been watching you online. Yeah, that one on the whole election thing, that was pretty good. Didn't think much about it. Months ago, I get a note from the front desk that says some guy here wants to meet you, to see you. It's him. And he comes in, he goes, I just got to tell you something right now. Been watching you online all through COVID and stuff, but beyond that, I just feel like I think there's a God, and I think he's calling me. And I don't know what to do with that. And I have to tell you, this is not a guy that you would say, oh, he's going to be, he'll believe in God, he'll follow Jesus. Absolutely not. And unfortunately, it's not a guy that I've poured into other than we referee soccer, and I have fun with him. In fact, I used the line I used with Joe. Last time I refereed this guy a year ago, it was before the start of the game. I said, oh, and by the way, so-and-so here, he's such a horrible ref, he just got his license back. So, and of course, he's like, what are you doing to me? And you know what? He doesn't know what I'm doing to him. I'm setting up a relationship that we laugh and talk about later. So here's my challenge for you. It goes with my theme, 222. It's not 220 pounds. 2 people in the year 22. 2 in 22. If you would take the challenge to have in your life the holistic walk with God that you'd seek to have, that I believe you'd want to have, and if you would see your walk with God go places where you've never dreamt it would go, would you commit in the next year to commit yourself to having at least one relationship with one other Christian guy? Not some passing thing, I come to the men's breakfast, but something where you build a relationship with one guy where you speak into each other's lives. One. Second relationship, deliberately be looking for the relationships with the non-church guy where you simply hang, become friends, and please don't think in terms of one. The way that goes, you got to be thinking in terms of 10 for one, 20 for one. But you begin to have one, and my final statement is, if any of that feels hard, you're talking to the guy who hates that stuff. Hates it from a personality perspective. I'm not wired that way. But from a guy who will do that because I have seen my walk with God soar when I have people in my life that I walk with spiritually and let them speak into my life. And whenever I'm walking with someone who doesn't know Jesus, it's just electrifying to be with them when they ask a question, when they walk into church. One of my soccer officials sat in the third row one Sunday. It was almost to the place where I couldn't preach, I thought, because in the middle of the sermon, I saw them. And I just wanted to stop right there and say, what are you doing here? But then I realized that when you do what I'm asking you to do, 2:22, when you do that, do not expect to see, no one's going to come back and expect you next year and say, hey, listen, I led 3 people to Jesus because look at them. No, years. It's the missional living over time where you begin to see fruit. Let me just have prayer, and then you can wrap up. Father, thanks for these guys. Thank you for their attentiveness. I do believe that any one of us here would love to have an incredible walk with you. And I don't assume that we already don't have an incredible walk, but it's not in its fullness without those 2 relationships. I've now come to realize that in my life. I want that in their lives. No one's going to come back and check on them. No one's holding their hands. But I just pray that in a handful of us, there'd be a willingness to say, I can do that. 2, by end of 22, someone to speak into my life spiritually and I into theirs, and I'm going to deliberately build a relationship with someone who doesn't know Jesus. Amen. Thanks, guys.
Challenge, guys, and just wanted to thank Pastor Scott. I said earlier that it's been a while since he's last spoken, and I know exactly how many days. It's been 7,315 days. So I'm going to ask you guys to help me make sure that it's not so long between the next time that he speaks and now. So anyway, thank you very much, Pastor Scott. And
for the record, I'm speaking tomorrow morning. And I spoke last Sunday morning.
And as a small token of our appreciation, we have a logo T-shirt for you, Pastor Scott. Maybe you could use it for cutting your grass and some logo golf balls.
Oh, hey, listen, is it extra small because I got the chili?
We have all the sizes. If it's not the right one, no, it'll give you a different one. Just a couple minutes, guys, before we part ways here, but just wanted to talk briefly about a couple of upcoming events. We have this, this is when our ministry year begins, and so we have men's Bible study. We have a couple of new study groups that are beginning. So I encourage you to go out on Church Center where you can find more information about that. We have a golf scramble. This is kind of our annual men's kickoff event. A golf scramble coming up on the 8th of October. And so please go to Church Center to sign up. We have a barbecue immediately following that. And this is all of the links at Lang Farm. They give us the tent, graciously give us their tent and facilities there, grilling facilities free of charge. This year is something different. We're combining this event with youth ministry to help raise funds for Life 22. And so for the golf event, we'll be selling mulligans. All of those proceeds go to the youth. And then we're not charging at the barbecue. It's actually not a men's barbecue. It's hosted by men's ministry, but we're inviting everybody. So spouses, neighbors, anybody's welcome. And we just ask you to make generous donation after we cover our food costs. All of those proceeds will then go to the youth ministry for life. Our next men's breakfast is coming up November 6th, so mark your calendars. We have a special guest coming in. I wanted to very briefly talk about men's life action teams. And so there's a QR. You can go to the previous pre-service slide. We'll have we'll have a registration on Church Center. But what this is in the area of your interest, we want you to be able to serve. So for example, if you're interested in hosting a hike or a biking event, we'd like you to sign up. If you're interested in mentoring, we'd like you to sign up. You get the picture. And if there are categories there that you don't see that you have a heart for, please let me know, and we can include that. A couple brief recognitions here. I just wanted to, if Tom Price and George would come up. I have something to recognize you with. Tom Price, George, come on up. These guys are always helping us out with our men's breakfast, and so if you just come here, George. Just want to. It's like a hoodie ceremony almost. So we have a Chef George and Chef Thomas here. Perfect, thank you guys, thank you so much. I want to end with a recognition of somebody that has been a vital part of men's ministry for many years, has served in many different roles in our church. And so I want to recognize Tim Kelly. Tim, if you would stand up. We have a t-shirt for you. Just take a selfie with you, but I just want to say a couple things about Tim. Tim actually led men's ministry for almost 11 years, and I know he served on the governing board. He did our spiritual gift class. I know he's doing a ferment-only class, and he'll continue to do that. But Tim is moving. He and his wife are now moving back home to where I think she's from, State College, Pennsylvania. He's leaving, I think, the 8th of October. I'm going to be sending out an email too. He needs help loading his moving van, so I'll send that out and ask for some help with that. But would you guys please just warmly just say thank you with me for Tim and his many years of service. As you can see, we have plenty of pie, and there's some pies that we didn't get to. We just had too many pies. I always plan for more, but please feel free to take, and we'll help you wrap that up if you'd like to take some home with you. And if you can stay a little bit extra if you have time to help us break this down, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you guys. God bless. Have a great weekend.